This might be the funnest part. Okay, I'm going to ask the KDHE folks to go ahead, and we're going to take down the maps initially during the meeting. One of the things that we learned from the first meeting is this room echoes, and it gets really loud. So one of the rules I'm kind of asking is that we're going to try to hold the side conversations down. This presentation I'm going to give is much shorter, okay? So you won't have to sit there for an hour just listening to me go yap, yap. And then once we do that, then we'll have a question and answer, and then we'll have the maps back up, and we'll have KDHE, and you can come up and ask individual questions if you'd like. So we're going to go ahead and get going. First of all, thank you for coming out again tonight. I know this is something that is probably weighing on a lot of people's minds, and you know it's stressful to think of all this. We do have some folks here, some of our local officials that I do want to make mention of. We have Commissioner Michael O'Donnell, who's in the back over there, and we'll give him an opportunity to speak here in just a second. We got Representative Crum is over on the side here, Representative Whitmer, and then we have officials from the city as well. And we have Senator Dan Kirshen is with us as well. Do any of you have something you want to say before we get going?
Thank you all for coming out tonight. On behalf of Sedgwick County, I just want you to know that we are taking this very seriously, and we have representatives from the Environmental Department. Susan Ellerwine is here, and Cindy, her new deputy. But Sedgwick County is here to help KDHE in any way possible. We know there's nothing more sensitive or important than clean water. And that's why we've been meeting with Clem Dickerson and members of the Kansas legislature that are here. And in fact, I think Representative John Whitmer and State Senator Dan Kirshen want to say something as well. But we've been in constant contact since we learned about this 3 weeks ago. So I think John's going to come up, or Dan. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad so many people came out and turned out to get some information, continuing ongoing information on what's going on here with the contamination and how we're dealing with it. And I want to thank Secretary Mosier, who called, left me a message right from the start about these meetings and what they were doing and follow up. And the department has been very cooperative. I appreciate that, and they agreed to have this meeting tonight to want to further continue that conversation, so we can be assured that the things are being taken care of that need to be done, the water is being tested. We need to protect public health, our investments in our community, our property tax, our homes, and our whole community. So I'm glad that we put this on, and it's an ongoing process, and let's get the most out of it we can and get the right information in the right place and do it right. So thank you for coming and showing interest. We want to make sure this works right.
I recognize a lot of you. I've probably knocked on most of your doors, but for those of you who don't know, my name's John Whitmer. I represent everything south of Grand and then west to the county line. And if you have questions, if you're dealing with KDHE and you have issues and you're not getting the answers you want, I've got my cards. Please come over. I'll give you one. It's got my cell phone on it. I want you to call me so that I can help. If you're not getting the responses that you need from KDHE, reach out to me. I'll be happy to intervene on your behalf. So Steve Crum has a little bit of Hayesville that's in this, but he represents everything north of Grand. I have everything south of Grand. But if you do have questions and you need help, come get a card, call me anytime. So.
I just want to thank everybody for coming out. Some of you maybe came to the first meeting too. I don't think the mayor's going to talk. I just wanted to kind of ensure everybody that KDHE and the city of Hayesville, because I'm also on city council, working very closely together. Council even had a special council meeting last week to get speed up some of the things that need to happen. Great communication back and forth. We're back there already making plans right now for some other things. So I just want to assure you that the KDHE in Hayesville is working hard to try to help alleviate the problem as much as we can. Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this. So my name is Bob Jergens, and I am a section chief with our Bureau of Environmental Remediation. And the dry cleaner remediation program is one of the 8 programs that I oversee. So we're out here today to basically, let me get this going. So our agenda, we did the welcome and introductions. We're going to talk a short summary of the situation, since a lot of you were here at a previous one. And then updates since our last one about 3 weeks ago. Some frequently asked questions. We've had a lot of you call in and ask some questions. We've seen stuff on social media. We'll try to answer a few of those ahead of the time. And then we'll have a question and answer session after that, in which we can answer anything you want to throw up at us. So really, what is the concern? So the groundwater contamination comes from the former American cleaners at 412 West Grand. One thing that to be fairly clear about, there's also a laundromat at that same location, but the laundromat and the dry cleaner were separate. The dry cleaner was on, I believe, the east side of that building. The existing laundromat is not the source of the contamination that we're aware of. And then we've had impact to some drinking water wells, some lawn and garden wells. As far as we can tell, there was nothing illegal done at this property. This was just back in the day, the way that they take care of the solvent and the separator water, it went down the sewers. These are just kind of the things that it was done. We've learned a lot in the industry since then and know a lot better. So for those of you that have had your well sampled, you're going to see a variety of chemicals that you are either detected, or at least we looked at. PCE, which was the solvent that was used at this facility, is the primary, and then through natural degradation, that breaks down to TCE, which breaks down to DCE, and then vinyl chloride, and eventually to ethene, which is what we're trying to get to. So you may see in the upper part of the plume, they were seeing more PCE and TCE, and then as it got down, the chemical was degrading and breaking down. So once you get past 79th Street, it's more of the cis-1,2-DC and the vinyl chloride. So what does that mean? Maximum contaminant levels are set by EPA, and then they're adopted by KDHE. And for PCE and TCE, it's 5 parts per billion. For cis-1,2-DC, it's 70 parts per billion, and vinyl chloride is 2 parts per billion. So you can tell the vinyl chloride, that's a pretty low number. That's a known carcinogen, and so that's one we take pretty seriously when we're looking at this. These up at the source area, I don't have that information, but I'm going to say the PC was probably in the neighborhood of 100 or so. I would have to verify that, but I think it's around that. So to give you perspective, we have some other sites where we're in really hundreds of thousands. And so the 100, it's contaminated, it's there, there might be a couple hundred there, and as it moves away, those levels drop off, which is why we see what we do. Okay? So the MCL is the key thing that we're trying to pay attention here. Okay. I had this up earlier. If you really want to see how contaminants move through ground, you can actually go out on YouTube and kind of search for contaminated groundwater models, and there's a lot of universities do these glass models where they put sand and soil in and then they inject a dye, and you can see how it moves through. So if you ever got some extra time, it's a good way to kind of see how that works. But basically, you have the contamination will come from maybe the sewer lines leak. It might have been the filters were in the dumpsters and there was some leaks from there. It works its way down through the soil, eventually getting to the groundwater, and groundwater is flowing. So it's going a direction, and once it hits that groundwater, then that carries the contamination as it goes down. As it rains and we have snow melt and stuff, you get percolation of that water through, and as you get further away, that fresh water comes down over the top and it kind of pushes it down. So as it's going away from the dry cleaner in this case. That's why it's part of why it's dropping down to a deeper level. Also, the contamination, it wants to follow the path of least resistance, and typically in sand and gravel, it gets coarser as you go down with depth, and so that contamination wants to go down. Some of the questions we get is, why is my well clean when my neighbors had detections? That may be dependent upon the screen interval, the depth that the pump is set at. Those can just be some of the variables. And you can see in this case here, maybe there's a silt lands or something in there where the contamination's staying on top of that. Well, your well may be beneath that, you know, compared to your neighbors. So that's kind of a cartoon picture, but it gives you a general understanding. So the area concern that we talk about, one point to clarify here, the area in the red line that we have on the map, that is not the contaminated area. The contaminated area is within that, and then we set what we felt was going to be a clean buffer. In this case, it was several blocks. And so that outside area is where we did not expect to find any contamination. And that's important because we get calls from folks outside the area of concern that say, well, why aren't you worried about my property? We already have a buffer there, so that's why we think it's not there. Now we're proving that with the sampling. So we're going back and we're evaluating that area of concern boundary as we get this analytical data, and I'm going to show you a map in here in just a little bit that will show you that too a little more. The other question we get is, and here's a big one, and we've seen it on social media and other folks calling, is, why wasn't I told if you knew my well was contaminated 6 years ago? So we knew that there was contamination up at the source area where the dry cleaner was 6 years ago. We had that basic information just at that area. We did not know that any homes had contaminated private wells until July of this year. Okay, so that's kind of a key thing. So on this, let me see, there's a pointer. Oops. Here we go. So here we had, in 2011 is when we found out about the contamination. In 2016, we were investigating another site that was just down the street, and that showed some PCE. So we actually thought the contamination was going a slightly different direction. In December of 2016, so about, 8-9 months ago, we let out a contract to go investigate this site. In April of 2017, we started doing some more groundwater sampling, realizing groundwater went a slightly different direction than we initially anticipated here. So that's when we started stepping up our sampling. We moved out further and we started to see the direction the groundwater was going, where the contamination was going. That's when we started sampling a lot of private wells. Those of you that were north of 79th Street were the first ones to get sampled. And then in July 18th of 17, that's when we found the first contaminated well. Okay? So late July, we started talking with the city about extending water mains. We knew we were going to have contamination. We started trying to identify all the private wells in the area, which was a lot. We had that first meeting here in this building on August 17th, and then the city signed an MOA, a memorandum of agreement, to install these water mains, and KDHE agreed to pay for it the end of August. That memorandum of agreement was signed by our secretary today, and tomorrow I'll get the paperwork in to start processing the payment. We'll pay the initial $3 million to the city so they can start ordering pipe and getting all that stuff in. And so here we are today, and we're doing the second meeting, which is to help clarify some things. There's a lot of kind of misinformation. Just, you know, when I say something and it goes to the next person, goes to the next person. It's easy for things to lose the original meaning sometimes. So this meeting is really meant to help clarify, some of the things that we're doing. So there are 269 properties in the area of concern. Not all of those have houses. Some of those are going to be vacant lots, but there's several hundred houses, probably well over 200 houses out there. To date, we have sampled 133 wells. Or I take that back. We've sampled more than 133. We have 133 results in, and we have another 20 that we received from our district staff today. Of those 133 wells, we have 4 wells that exceed the EPA standard, that MCL that I talked about. So what that tells us is overall the contamination's fairly low level, but we do have impacts, and we do want to take care of it. Of those 133, 55 had detections, but they're below the EPA standard. So according to EPA and KDHE, it's still acceptable to drink that water based on that risk. Now, when that's your well, that's still not a good warm and fuzzy, like I'm going to go ahead and drink that. But at the same time, we have standards that we've got to compare everything to. And so those 55 are below those standards, and 74 were non-detect. There was nothing detected in there. So this is the first map. The map on the left is the one that I showed you guys, the ones that were here 3 weeks ago. And the blue, anything in blue is a property that did not have any detections. Anything in the pink or the magenta, kind of purplish color, those are ones that are below the EPA standards. So technically it's still okay to drink that. And anything in red is above the EPA standards. Okay? Now flash forward to, I'll come back to you in just a second if it's all right. Move forward to the 5th of September. These are the 133 that we've sampled. Fortunately, we see a lot of blue. We see some more of the pinks. But I don't think we have identified any more above the MCLs. That is correct. So yeah. So what that is that's actually at less than the detection limit. So the detection limit for those is 0.5, and everything on your result there is actually at less than 0.5. That's how the laboratory reports that. So even though it says 5 on there, that it's saying it's non-detect, it's below that standard. Yes, sir. Okay. What it means? Okay. So the question is, how do we know what it means when we get the results? Correct. That's right, because the laboratory is only going to report to, they could only get down to a certain level, and so that RDL is their reporting level. It's the detection level. And that RDL of 0.5, like if it's Cis12DC, the acceptable standard is 70, so it's well below. The only one that's closer is the vinyl chloride. But if it's below those detection levels, that's still a positive result. We're happy with that, actually. Okay, so let me see if I can get through the rest of the presentation, then we'll maybe circle around to try to better explain that. Okay, so the alternative drinking water, so what does this mean? In the areas that had detections, especially the pinks, go back to the map, that area in the yellow, so that's roughly where we think there's some level of contamination. And the areas that we're going to put water mains currently is anything in the red lines, the AOC, we're going to put water mains on those streets. Some of those, the area of concern may shrink just a little bit because we're finding large areas. Oops, sorry. There's quite a bit of area over here that's several blocks away from the contamination. But that's still to be determined exactly who we're all going to connect. But if anybody's in that yellow area, plus about roughly a 1-block buffer zone, are going to get connected. That's what our plan is at this point in time. So if there was a water main there, we would do an immediate hookup, but there are no water mains out here currently in front of homes where we can do that. Bottled water is being provided if anybody is 50% of the MCL, or if there's any detection above that 0.5 of vinyl chloride. So if anybody has a vinyl chloride above 0.5, we're going to provide bottled water. The CIS-1,2 DCE, if it's 35 part per billion or higher, we're going to provide bottled water. And then the PC and TC, there is nothing down south of 79th, but that'd be 2.5. And then the water mains are going to take a little time. I'll go into that in more detail on getting those installed. So the private water connection, some of the questions are, do we have to pay for the private water connection to set the meter? And for the area where KDHE is going to say, nope, that's in the area concern, KDHE will pay for the water meter set. Well, that's already in the MOA with the city. We will pay for the plumber to come and connect to the house, to disconnect from the old well, to convert the old well either over to a lawn and garden well if you want it, or to abandon it if somebody doesn't want that well. If somebody has a well inside their house, we have to abandon those because we cannot leave wells inside the house potentially open to let vapors come up. So we will be abandoning those wells. So far, we only know of a couple of those. So typically, we're going to do open trenching to put in the lines to the house. We can't afford to do all horizontal boring, but there will be cases if we come to like a concrete driveway or something, there are times that we'll do a horizontal boring. As far as the city water main, the city has been working very hard on this. PEC, their engineer, has been doing the design, doing the surveying. You're probably seeing surveyors, folks out there looking for the pins for the property lines. They'll be installing those in the right-of-ways. That capital cost is being paid for by KDHE. We're going to get the initial $3 million out to them in the first payment, and then they'll submit basically as they spend money, they'll submit invoices to us to get that paid. There's no annexation. That's one of the concerns we heard, and the mayor mentioned that the last meeting, is there will be no annexation due to these water mains being put in. Okay? So these are the water mains that are planned right now, and it does cover all the streets in that AOC. They did make a slight change to bring the line over here and then come along the creek over here, and that was a significant cost savings by able to reroute that, and that was greatly appreciated. So what's in the green on this top area, that's called phase 1, and then everything in the blue is phase 2. Right now, they're going to bid it out such that they get a cost for phase 1 and a cost for phase 2. Right now, we're anticipating saying go ahead on those together. We don't see a major time frame on that, but in the bids, I believe they're asking that the phase 1 be done roughly within 3 months of the award, and phase 2 roughly within 6 months. So let's say everything in about 6 to 9 months, all the water mains should be in. As the water mains go in, we will be, and lines get approved, then we'll start our connections. So how's this being paid for? There's 2 funds that we can draw from. The Dry Cleaning Facility Release Trust Fund. That one does not have as much money in it, about $900,000 a year in annual income. And the one that's helping us out the most is the Environmental Stewardship Fund, which was put in place about 2 years ago. So the legislature's had some really good foresight to go ahead and get this in place. Otherwise, we'd really be in trouble on this situation. But that brings in, approximately $5 million a year. It depends on how much income comes in on those. And that's for emergency response and being able to do assessments and remediation at orphan sites, which this is actually an orphan site. The responsible party, the dry cleaner, the one that operated it, is long gone. Now, we have about 300 sites that use this environmental stewardship and dry cleaning funding. So if you take the, roughly $6 million divided by that, we're looking at $20,000 a site per year. Well, so this one is looking to be in the neighborhood of the 6 to 7 million range to do all this. Well, that hurts the old pocketbook, obviously, because it really is going to prevent us from doing some other projects. But we are dedicated to trying to get this done. So we have set the money aside, and we'll get the initial payments going and get this project moving. So some of the frequently asked questions. Who will contact you from KDHE to sample your well or to find out if you want to connect? So all KDHE staff will have a picture ID, state issue ID that says KDHE on it and their picture. If KDHE staff do not have that, that's shame on them. They will have it. You do not need to let them on your property. Okay? There are folks going around that we've heard that are not associated with KDHE mentioning they want to come on to test your well and stuff like that and to sell you a treatment system. That is not us. Okay? So be wary of that. Also, if you get phone calls, so the phone calls are going to come from KDHE Central Office in Topeka, which is the 785 area code, and our district office in Wichita, which is a 620 area code. Okay, and so I was just proven wrong. It's 316 area code. Now, I guess if it comes from their landline, it could be a 620, maybe, I don't know. Okay, 316 and 620, but once again, they should identify themselves as KDHE. All right, when you go in and get your driver's license, they say they're going to take your picture, and you tell them to give you advance notice, and they take it a second before they tell you. Well, the pictures look bad on these, so don't worry about that, but basically what you're going to see, it'll say KDHE. This is an old one from 2001. The new logo looks like this, but it's still going to say KDHE, the name of the person, and the logo. This here is an emergency management, so somebody may have one as well in that format. And then all of our staff should have business cards that look like this in this format. Okay? If they don't have that, they're probably not associated with us. The only difference is when we get to start connecting for the private plumbers, GSI Engineering will be the one that will be out coordinating with you. But we will be telling you when that's going to happen and who that's going to be. Other frequently asked questions. Can I use a shower? Yes. We have not seen any levels, even up at the source area, that exceed the acceptable standards for what we call inhalation and dermal. And dermal is when it's absorbing through the skin. Inhalation is if you're taking a shower and you breathe in the steam, it's volatilizing off. We're not even close to those standards. So in our opinion, it is safe to take showers and to do that. Who gets the bottled water? I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but if there's any detection of vinyl chloride above the 0.5 or 50% of the other MCLs. Will KDHE sample the well if we're outside of that red AOC boundary line? And the answer is no. We have already set a very wide buffer zone on this, and all of the sampling is showing that AOC is correct. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of those blues around the outside of where we think this contamination is. If we can, and we're going to continue sampling wells, if we see that is not true and we need to extend that boundary, we will extend the boundary and we will contact everybody in the new area by letter and try to get hold of them on the phone, okay? So you won't have to worry about trying to call to find out if it's changed. If I'm in the current AOC, will I get connected to the new water mains? And yes, the likelihood it is, but we are going to look at those, probably those east and west boundaries a little bit. Typically, we are going to connect up to about 1 block away from the last known contamination. And keep in mind that contamination on those outsides has been much lower level. It's still in drinking water standards. So we will be probably making those decisions in the next couple of weeks if that AOC line is going to change. Regardless, the water mains are going in on those streets that I said, even if our AOC line shrinks a little bit. So those water mains will be there. So when will the water connection begin? So we're looking at that 3 to 6 month process to get most of the water mains in, worst case scenario, 9 months. And then as soon as those water lines are, I don't know if it's a certification or shown to be clear, that they can start connecting, then GSI Engineering will have a project manager that will contact folks and we'll set up visits. We'll have probably 3 or 4 or 5 plumbers. Those plumbers will come in, look at the property, and give us their recommendations for how to connect them. Now, when it comes to where the meter's going to sit on the property, as a property owner, you'll have some say in that, and if you like it in one spot over the other, we'll try to accommodate that, unless it's going to be significantly higher cost. But typically, we work with the property owner to say where that meter is going to be. We'll put a stake in the ground, and that's where that meter is going to get connected. So we'll be working very closely with the city on, they'll open up certain areas, even though they might be working on some others. It really depends on the engineering. Will the water connections be completed for vacant lots? And the answer is no on that. We are connecting folks that have occupied properties. If there is a house that's vacant for a month or two because it's waiting on a new tenant or a renter or somebody's buying it, that will still be connected. If there's a house that maybe just has a pole shed or something on it, nobody has lived there, we won't be connecting that because it's not developed for occupancy at that time. And those ones that are in between that are a question, we'll just deal with those on a case-by-case basis. Yeah.
Will we all get 4 bids for you, so will it be 4 plumbers?
Oh, okay. So the question was, do you guys have to get the 4 bids? No, we'll actually get all the bids. We'll have the plumbers all come in at one time. So they'll look at your house. We'll need to have somebody there to let us in. They'll look at the house. They'll basically come to agreement how it's going to enter the house and make the connections. They'll submit those bids to GSI Engineering, and then we'll choose. We're going to lump them together. So we may go out to 10 homes, and then we're going to award 5 properties to one plumber, 5 to another. All these plumbers are going to be really, really busy. So we'll kind of spread it out, but we'll go primarily with low bid. One of the questions we often hear is, what if I want to use plumber ABC versus XYZ? We'll try to accommodate, but if plumber ABC has the highest bid, we typically won't be able to do that. So you'll have an opportunity to say, I like this plumber. If his bid is close, we'll go with him. So if he bids $2,000 and the one you want bids $2,000, $2,100, typically we'll go with that. But if one person bids $2,000, the other one bids $4,000, we're not going to go with the $4,000 because we got to keep it be as efficient as possible. Okay. As far as who do you contact, these are the same names that were up on the previous one. Kevin Moon is the project manager. Kevin is in the blue shirt in the back with the glasses. He's been the spearhead on this. Joe Dom is a lot of you have talked to, and Joe is our unit manager. And Joe had requested vacation leave many, many moons ago, and I decided to let him go, even though probably could have pulled him back, but he went to like me very well. So he's on vacation today, but Joe has done a ton of work and worked a lot of extra hours keeping things moving on this. And then if you have health-related questions, the last meeting we had Farah Ahmed here, and Farah was not able to get here. This meeting was turned around in a very short time frame to try to answer some of these questions, but she is willing to take any phone calls that anybody has. You can email her, you can give her a call, and we can get those answered. If any of you lose these numbers, KDHE has created a website on our dry cleaning page, and I'll show you the web address here shortly, and you can always contact Kevin or Joe, and we can get you in touch with Farah as well. So that website, and I'll come to the question in just a second, I'll quick get this, is www.kdhe.gov/dryclean/Hayesville. And most likely, if you Google dry clean KDHE Hayesville, you'll probably come up with it. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and go to some questions. And Mr. Whitmer, did you have? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The question is whether this presentation will go up on our website, and yes, it will. The one from the previous meeting should be there, and we'll get this to the webmaster probably tomorrow. I would expect it to be up early to middle part of next week at the very latest. All right, we're going to do a question and answer, and I'm going to start here. And okay, the question is, do we think the contamination is more or less centralized where it's going to be? What would prevent it from spreading? Is that, I think I got that right. So this contamination's been around for a long time, based on when the dry cleaner was in operation. And these contaminant plumes, after a while, they do stabilize, depending on how much of the source area is still there. Since the levels at the source area, although they're higher than the acceptable standards, they're not really super high, we do believe this plume is fairly stable. But we are going to be installing monitoring wells to track that, and we're going to continue to track where this plume is at for many years to come. And if we see it start to move, then we will extend our AOC boundaries out. So right now, we believe this is where we're at, but those monitoring wells will probably start going in the end of this month into early October, and we'll be sampling those probably every 4 months for the first year, and then probably twice a year after that. Okay, let's go. Yeah, I believe the date of contract award for that, and so part of that depends on a lot of cooperation from, I know the county's been working really good with them on getting the locations, places where we do need to go across private property, there's easements, all that has to come together, but that is from the date of award. Has a bid date been established, or when we want to send out the RFP, or you? I don't know. So the RFP, the request for proposal on this, goes out next week. And they're, and, okay, and the goal is to have the bids back by September 13th. That's pretty quick turnaround. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go to the lady right behind you. Yeah, that's, you know what, if you signed up at the last meeting to have your well tested, it has not been done, something happened our end, please get with Kevin and we will double check that. That should not have happened, because I think we had thought we had sampled all the wells. Obviously we didn't. So we will get that fixed, and anybody who has asked to have their well sampled and it has not been sampled yet, let us know tonight. And if you hadn't ever told us and you still want it sampled, let us know tonight. And I'm going to hold 1 second. Where's Clay at? Clay, can you come up here and help me identify who's next on the list? So, I'm sorry, I got a lot of hands up, so I'm going to try to get to all of you. Let's go here next.
I actually have a couple questions. I'm in a high flood area. Will, like, when it's flooded, who's to say the affected area doesn't come down my way?
So you're in a high flood area in the area of concern, or?
I'm 2 blocks south of your affected area.
Okay.
But another concern is the lady across the street from me died from cancer. My dad and his roommate died from cancer. The lady before that lived in my house died of cancer.
Right.
And they told, when I called with that issue, they said they couldn't test my water, but that's a lot of people to die of cancer in 2 years.
It is, and you know, the health effects on this is tough. And Farah is one who typically would answer this question. She did put together a fact sheet. Last time we I'm going to get your question. Last time we had some ATSDR, it's federal fact sheets. Those are hard to read. She tried to rewrite it to make it a little bit easier. But one of the things that states in here, I believe, is that 1 in 3 people will come down with cancer of some sort. And so it's really difficult to try to tie contamination in with excess cancer, but it is something she's going to look at. She's going to look at the cancer registries and look at the types to see if there's a potential cluster or a higher incident in this area.
Before my dad and Mr. Mayor moved into this house, they were fine, and they lived there, I think, about 8 years, and they were both diagnosed with cancer.
Right.
Cancer that's on your guys' fact sheet within that period.
I understand. It's the cancer part's a very difficult thing to answer because there's no way to put just a finger on exactly what happens. Your question on the flooding, so most of the flooding is going to be overland flow. We would not expect these contaminants to go in overland flow because this contamination is underground in the groundwater. And that overland flow is also going to have so much water coming in that would dilute anything that was there anyway. So we would not expect that to be an issue. Yes, sir. Yeah, so the question is, since it's been going on quite a while, would this just dissipate on its own? It probably would, but that may be 100 years. It would take a long time. So that's the problem with PCE and the degradation. It does last a long time. So what we'll do is take care of the water issue, and then we'll go back up to the source area and we'll try to remediate the contamination up there, which will stop it from continuing to feed into the contamination that's going down gradient. And once you do that, typically you see the plumes start to shrink quite a bit. So that's our goal, but it takes money and time. So as far as cleanup of this plume, you know, we're looking at quite some time. I mean, this may be 20 to 30 years before it's done. Okay, there. Right. Okay, so the question is, what's the likelihood of the city annexing this area? And the city has indicated they will not annex this area because of these water mains. And the question is there any other city tax to expect on this property due to this? And the answer is no, that city does not plan anything like that. So right now, they've been very clear, they're not going to annex anything because of these water mains. You know, I think we asked that question last time, and the question is, so the city said they won't annex it, but what happens 10 years down the road? I don't know if, I'm going to let you answer that one. Okay, so the response was on what about annexing years down the road, and the city has no plans to annex, but you never know, with future administrations, things can change. It just won't happen because of this water main installation. If that is, it'd be due to greater circumstances than that, I would think. Yes, sir. Kevin, do we know how many we have left to sample? Okay. I think it's probably safe to say we'd like to finish up our sampling in the next couple of weeks. Yeah. So that when will the remediation of the source area start? Not for a while, and the reason is we're going to be spending $6 to $7 million out here doing the water mains, hooking things up. Well, at that same time, we've got roughly another 300 sites that need work, and we're going to have to continue to try to work on some of those. Actually, right now, we've got 3 different sites with impacted drinking water wells. And so these pop up. So the timing of that will depend a little bit. Now, one thing I would say is when we put these water mains in and we connect people to the city water, that does reduce the overall risk to the site because nobody's drinking it. So the priority actually drops a little bit. But our goal is still to get up there and to be able to do some remediation and try to shrink this plume down. So I can't give you an answer because there is a whole lot goes into new sites coming in. I don't have a good answer on when we'll have it remediated. Okay, ma'am? The tests, you're talking about the wells that we plan on putting in? Yeah, the wells we plan on putting in, I don't have a map with me. We're going to have a line along 79th Street, roughly along 83rd kind of area. I don't know if that's a street, but kind of in the Kirby, is that Nicole? Kind of along Nicole. We'll have some further north. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to put a series perpendicular to the plume, and we'll have some in the middle and then others just on the outside where the contamination is, and we'll be able to monitor to see if those change. And then we'll also have some down around the church, the Prairie Cowboy Church, I forget what the name is, down in that area. So we're just finishing up those locations, and the driller is getting it scheduled, so they're going to be out there towards the end of the month. No, they'll be scattered throughout the whole plume. I think we have 20-some wells that are going in, so it'll cover the entire area. Say that again. Most of them would be east, except for the ones that are further north, closer to the site. Yeah. Those will typically be in the right of way. That is correct. We have we're going to put one on the church property. They agreed to that. So. Yes. Okay, the question is, what should they anticipate for a monthly water bill for a family of 4 with some outside usage? Okay. What I would say is they're saying it's kind of hard to estimate that, but is it okay if they contact you guys directly to try to get an idea? So call the city water department and see if they can maybe give you a better idea. Yeah. Do you know what the per 1,000 gallon rate is? It's $2.83 for the first 1,000, and then there's a base rate. No? Okay. We'll get you more information. Yes, sir. Once the lines are in, the maintenance does fall to the homeowner. Yes. From the meter back to the house. Inside the meter, is that the city responsibility for maintenance? Yes. So the water main to the meter, city, and then meter to the house of the homeowners. Well, any maintenance that you have, if there's any breaks or anything or trees, growing up through it, that'd just be the property owners. So I'm going to go back to you next, ma'am. So the question is, if somebody has their well tested and it's a positive result, will we bring a water main to you? We want to get that information. You give us a call, show us the information, give us the data, and then our field staff will get with you to see what's going on. It is doubtful that it's related to this, but maybe there's something else out there. Okay. Right, I understand. Yes, sir. So the question is, the city of Wichita has a remediation system. I believe it's the Gilbert and Mosley site you're talking about. They pump the water out of the ground. They run it through, I believe it's a Hazelton air stripper to strip the stuff out. So we would not be putting something into that level. That's millions of dollars in itself to do that type of system. Typically, when a site like this, we would go in and do some excavation if there's soil contamination, or we will do some sort of a chemical injection to promote bioremediation, which basically bacteria that will break it down, or we'll do a chemical oxidation. That chemical will react with it to break it down as well. So they're different technologies. Yes, sir. Okay, I didn't catch that. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, the question is there any chance that the contamination has affected any of the creeks in the area? And the answer is no, because the contamination is well underground in the groundwater. Okay? Yes, sir. No, we're not doing that now. That'll be something that we look at after we're done with this whole project. It's actually happening, the fact that we have vinyl chloride and cis-1-DCE. This is likely happening because of all of the, essentially the sewage systems, the septic systems that are out there. That is driving everything to probably to anaerobic, and that's what's causing some of this degradation, most likely. So it'll be something similar that we try to do. Yes, sir. That it will shrink? Yeah, 50-50 right now. I don't want to say there's a chance that it'll shrink until we finish getting the data. I think the areas that it might shrink would be on the east and west sides along 79th Street roughly, a little bit south of 79th to the west. There's some areas where it's probably 3 blocks or so from the contamination to the boundary. It'll affect limited number of people though. So yeah, the question is, the water mains are going in no matter what, based on this area of concern. If the area shrinks and you happen to be outside of that, we would not be connecting that. It'd be there available for to connect if you want to, but we would not be connecting because the only way that you would be outside the area of concern is if you've got multiple properties between you and the contamination that are all clean. So technically the water is still clean. Okay, so the question is, if you have an existing private drinking water well and we are going to convert that over, what we'll do is we can convert it at the wellhead and put a hydrant right there, and you can use that to water the lawn, wash the car, all that kind of stuff. On occasion, depending on how the plumbing is, we will also go ahead and leave a hydrant on the house. If the plumbers can get to it, if there's a basement, if there's a crawl space, and we can get to that and still leave a hydrant on the well water, we'll do that. It gets tagged as non-potable. Non-potable means do not drink it, basically. And you're going to be signing a form saying that if we do that, you agree not to drink this water, and you cannot convert that back over. So there, depending on how your house is laid out, we will be able to leave a spigot there as well. Yes.
A question about, I have a water softener and I may want to continue to use that. So if you're bringing water to my house outside, then am I responsible for the expense to hook up my water softener?
So I believe the city would have water to where you would not need a water softener. Is that correct? Is your water treated?
It's up to them, but they should not need a water softener.
Yeah.
The pumpers that I have talked to have said no. Water softeners usually will drop your water pressure.
Okay. So most of the time when you hook to a city water system, their water's already treated to a certain degree. You don't need the water softener. If you wanted it, depending on how your plumbing's set up, we're going to connect behind it or in front of it anyway, so it could still happen. Okay, and if that's an easy thing for our plumbers to do, then we'll do that. It can still go through. You're going to probably lose water pressure though when you do that. That will depend on when the plumbers come out. They'll look at how your system's set up. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we should try to make phone calls and let you know when we're going to be there. So miscommunication will happen with this many, and we'll try to prevent that. We don't want to get bit by your dog, and your dog doesn't want to be scared by us. So, yes, we will definitely make sure we get in contact with everybody. If we need to lock up a dog, chain up a dog, close the door, yeah, that's what we prefer to. Yes, sir. Yeah, we found out about that the last meeting, and that's something we'll be investigating. Depending on the age of the facility, the question is whether you use PCE or use a petroleum-based solvent. But that is something we're going to look at that one, and then we understand there might be another one just down Grand a little further too. So we appreciate that information. Yes, sir. Correct. I believe we're setting it at 50. Does that sound, you guys probably not sure. Where is GSI? Are they? Okay, I think it's 50 PSI is what we set it at, which typically we found out from like City of Wichita, that ended up being pretty good for them yet. Right. We'll put that pressure reducing valve in. If you don't want the pressure reducing valve, you will have to sign a waiver. But if there's any leaks, KDHE will not be responsible for them. So if you're running at a higher pressure than now, the odds are there shouldn't be a leak, but it's not a responsibility we can take long term. Yes. Well, I'm not sure the type of valve they're putting on. We could get that information if you want to get us your name and number. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so if the pressure, I'll back this up. If you decide not to have the pressure reducing valve set at 50 on there and there's a leak, no matter what, after we start it up, then that would be the responsibility of the homeowner. If we have the pressure reducing valve and during all the testing and we find leaks, and I mean, some of these houses are going to have some leaks, the plumber will do their best to make everything operational. Once they leave, everything's working, there's no leaks, the maintenance is then on the homeowner. We've had a few instances where somebody came and said, hey, we had this issue. We have gone back on occasion and fixed some, but it's pretty rare because usually they're in pretty good shape. Okay? Yes, sir. Okay. That is correct. Yes. I'd say Yeah, come show us your location. After this is done, I can probably answer that better then, okay? Okay, I had one right here. Hold on just a second. So this room is going to echo, so if we could keep the side conversations down just a little, I can see if I can hear. Thanks. Go ahead. Okay, so the question is, if you got two houses on a property, will we do one line or two? We do one line for each house. Yes. Okay, yes, ma'am. The impact on the septic. The question is, once we get this connected, will that lessen the impact on the septic tanks? I'm not sure what you mean, but the septic tanks probably have impact on some of the quality in some of these wells. So I'm not sure if I understand. Okay, I tell you what, come talk to me later afterwards, and I might be able to figure out what we're trying to say. Okay, yes. All right, the question is, she lives about a mile or so outside of the boundary, down towards that direction. Will KDHE keep monitoring? And we will not be monitoring outside this area of concern and where we put our monitoring wells in, which the monitoring wells are all inside our area of concern. So no, we don't anticipate monitoring outside of that. Now, if anybody decides to get their own private well sampled and they find contamination, then definitely report that to us and we will go investigate that. That's kind of how we find out about some of these. Okay, any other questions? All right, so we're going to get the maps put back up. We'll get KDHE kind of in each of the corners. Feel free to come up and ask individual questions, and I thank everybody for coming out. Thanks to the school district for letting us use the facility again tonight.